This week, the world lost one of the greatest Jewish leaders of our time. Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks was more than the chief rabbi of the UK. He was a great ambassador for Judaism to the world. Through his 30 books and countless writings and lectures, Rabbi Sacks made the most complex philosophical Jewish ideas so easily accessible to all, Jew and non-Jew alike. His translations and interpretations of our most important Jewish liturgical books, the Siddur, the High Holiday Machzor, the Haggadah, gave new life to our ancient words. Rabbi Sacks helped us all hold our heads higher, knowing that the Jewish community had an erudite and compassionate leader. This week's parasha, Chayei Sarah, opens with the passing of Sarah and later details the end of the life of Avraham Avinu.
ויהיו חיי שרה 100 שנה ו20 שנה ו7 שנים שני חיי שרה ותמות שרה בקריית ארבע היא חברון בארץ כנען ויבוא אברהם לספוד לשרה ולבכותה ויגבה וימות אברהם בשיבה טובה זקן ושבע ויאסף אל עמיו.
Avraham was the first model of a spiritual leader who brought theological truths to the world and showed compassion to all he encountered. Rabbi Sacks writes that in this parasha, toward the end of Avraham's life, though he had received covenantal promises from God, none of them had yet come to be.
ואברהם זקן בא בימים והשם ברך את אברהם בכל.
Rabbi Sacks writes, Avraham had received 3 promises from God: children, a land, and the assurance that he would be the father not of one nation but of many nations. At the age of 137, Avraham had 1 unmarried son, no land, and had fathered no nations. He uttered not a single word of complaint. It seems that he realized that God wanted him to act, not to wait for God to do the work for him. Rabbi Sacks observes how frustrated Avraham must be. Here God is promising him an amazing future, but this future seems impossible. Rabbi Sacks observes that now, after the death of his beloved Sarah, Avraham springs into action. He writes, so when Sarah died, he bought the first plot in what would become the Holy Land, the field and cave of Machpelah. Then he instructed his servant to find a wife for Isaac, his son, so that he might live to see the first Jewish grandchildren. Lastly, in his old age, he married again and had 6 sons who would eventually become progenitors of many nations. He did not, except briefly, sit and mourn the past. Instead, he took the first steps toward building the future. Avraham does mourn his beloved wife, but he also understands that his time on earth is limited, and if he wants to see a different future, he needs to take steps to make it happen. Rabbi Sacks shows us that Avraham, even in the context of great promises from God, does not leave the fulfillment of those promises to God alone. Avraham takes action to create the world he wants to see for himself and for his children. As we are mourning the passing of Rabbi Sacks, perhaps the greatest tribute to his memory is for each of us to take action, to live by the values that he taught. Rabbi Sacks taught us to encounter those who are different from ourselves, to be committed to the education of our children and grandchildren, and to look to Jewish tradition for meaning and hope in the modern world. In his memory, perhaps we can renew our commitment to these values in our own lives. As we speak of Rabbi Sacks, one cannot help but think of our local loss here in Montreal. This week, our city mourns the passing of Father John Walsh, who, much like Rabbi Sachs, served the spiritual needs of so many beyond his own religious community. Father John was a familiar face here at the Shar. His warmth and sensitivity greeted all who encountered him. He had a special connection to our Shar clergy and to so many of Montreal's political and religious leaders. And in the model of Avraham, Father John was a man of action. Even toward the end of his life, he had a renewed passion for helping the homeless. And at the age of 78, he was in the midst of pursuing a PhD. Our city has lost one of our greats. We think of him on this Shabbat. May the memory of the righteous be a blessing and a model for us all. Yehi Zichram Baruch.
בשלום על משכבם ונאמר
May the peace of Shabbat bring peace to all of us. Shabbat Shalom.